Hello, everyone. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. This is about to be a really, really wonderful event. But before we start, can we give a hand to our musicians, Gary Gimberlin and Phil Lynch, please? Thank you guys so much. And I also want to thank the people that's on the live stream joining us here tonight for taking time to spend time with us. I really appreciate you for being here and supporting this event. My name is Rodney Outlaw, as most of you may know. I'm a person that loves our community, that's in our community, that works in our community, just like each and every one of you. So thank you again. Can we also thank Karen and Jim of Cavu Winery for hosting us tonight? So I want to explain how we're going to do this tonight. I'm really excited when David reached out to me to have this conversation to ask me to be a part of this. Not only was I honored to be a part of it, I was excited about how the framework was going to be. So if you didn't notice, most of you, when you came in, there was cards at the front that you can write your question on, and there was a basket that they can be put in. And they're brought here, where when we start taking questions, I will pull a question and I will read it and ask it to David, and David will give us his answer. Also, there's cards at your tables with writing utensils, because as the conversation goes on, new questions will come up. And if you have new questions coming up from the conversation, please use the card at your table, write your question, raise it up, and someone will come by and get it and bring it to the basket. Any questions? Okay, great. Now, I would like to introduce David. And this is still a little bit different for me with David because we had such great conversation. When I met David and we had coffee and we probably talked for about 2 hours, and then we talked some more over email and text and things. And it was so refreshing because every time I talked to David, he just listened, even though he's the one running for Congress. And he just listened and asked me, why do I help? Why do I want to do the things I do? And I was able to ask him those questions. And those questions always came from a place that made me feel they was very sincere from his heart. And it was really refreshing to hear that. Really refreshing. He never once really asked me for anything. He just showed me his heart. And for that, I thank him a lot. But if you need to know a few things about David was board president of Walla Alliance for the Homelessness, church council member in Pioneer United Methodist Church, member of Rotary, and it goes on and on and on. But I'm not going to sit up here and ramble about it. I'm going to invite David to the stage to share a little bit with us about himself and introduce it so we can get to the Q&A. So David, please join me, everyone. We're welcoming David Womack to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you so much, my friend. So, hey, wow, look at this room. It's full. It's crammed. Thank you so much for coming out here. This is one of the things I love about Walla is we turn out for things that are important and fun and happen in wineries, right? So before we get started with the business tonight, want to build a little bit of community here. Make sure you know some folks. I know a lot of you know other people in the room, but there's probably somebody you don't know. So, yes.
Can you hear okay?
I'm hearing impaired, so it's a little difficult.
Okay.
It's all right.
Sorry.
Can everybody hear okay? Okay, I'm getting a lot of thumbs up and nods and responses of affirmation. So think for just a moment of some American leader in the last 250 years, it's coming up on that big anniversary here, that you really, really admire. So just some American leader. Okay, you got that in your head? Now look around you, find somebody you don't know, and go introduce yourself and tell them who that American leader is. Okay? We're just going to take a few minutes to do that to get to know somebody new. Okay?
But hey, I don't know who you admire from. I prefer the thing that I did that he, you know, and explaining everything so thoroughly, and it's over our heads. Yes, maybe it's not in the political way. But that's what it is.
Well, you know, we need this.
All right. Oh, okay. Is that 2 minutes? You're not like the She walked in and she had her back turned and I said, how to lie. She was walking by and she ran to office and she wanted to. Yes. On her line. Not once it turned out to be me. She wasn't talking about me.
I noticed that the noise level in the room is not dying down. We did say that in the conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you. So one of the things we're trying to do in our campaign as we go around and meet with people is not only just campaign, but also create communities and help people get to know one another and spread a little hope and joy as we go along too. So hopefully you felt some hope and joy in that and got to know somebody a little bit new. And if you didn't, well, sorry, we'll try something different next time, I suppose. So I would be curious just to know a few of the people that were named. So over here, does somebody want to shout out this is the one time you get to shout tonight. You want to shout out a name? Barack Obama. Okay, applause for the former president. JFK.
FDR.
FDR.
Jimmy Carter. Carter.
I'm sorry? Barack Obama for a third term. I heard Jimmy Carter back there.
A Republican.
Kamala.
Barack Obama and Kamala, okay?
Washington.
Abraham Lincoln.
George Washington, Abraham Lincoln.
Republican. What's happened to the Republicans?
But yes, and there was a great stream of Republicans. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt too, right?
Dwight Eisenhower.
Very progressive Republican, yes. Dwight Eisenhower. Francis Perkins. James Garfield. Do I hear Millard Fillmore? Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, for indulging me a little bit in that. So I want to tell you just a little bit about myself. I know a lot of you know pieces about me, but I'll tell you just a little bit about myself and why I'm running, and then we'll get to the Q&A. So I am a retired Air Force colonel, and I have been a hospital administrator, hospital CEO, and healthcare executive with senior vice president for Kaiser Permanente. My last job in the Air Force was I was the medical group commander at Fairchild Air Force Base. So my wife Julie and I, we lived there, we lived on the base. We know the military and the veteran community, have a good feel for Spokane as well. I've run 2 rural hospitals after the Air Force, one in central Illinois and the other one in Colfax. I was the CEO over there. So know a little bit about the Palouse in that area as well. And then when Julie and I finally got to decide where we were going to live, we thought, you know what, Eastern Washington was pretty nice. And she had been to Walla Walla to visit some folks, and I had not, but she put it on the short list, and we came up here and we decided, okay, Walla Walla is where we want to be. So that's how we got here. That's kind of my breadth of knowledge about the region as well. I haven't just lived in one spot here, but all over. And I feel called right now, at this moment in time, to run for this position in Congress because of what's going on in the country and how it's affecting us right here in Eastern Washington. Because the oath I swore at 23 years old when I was commissioned an officer in the Air Force. I raised my right hand and I said these words: I, David Womack, do solemnly swear I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. People often refer to those first few words, support and defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But right after that, it says, I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. True faith and allegiance to the same. And I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office of which I am about to enter. So help me God. That's the full oath. When I started thinking about running for this position, I thought, what oath am I going to have to take if I'm elected to be a member of Congress? So I looked it up. It's the exact same oath. Exact same oath. I don't feel like my oath ever expired. I'm happy to renew it a year from now. But I started thinking about our current members of Congress and if they've lived up to that oath. And when I read the Constitution, I can't answer yes to that for an awful lot of them. And that lack of integrity is hurting us and our neighbors and people all across this district every day. And we can choose a different path. With new representatives in Congress, we can have a different choice. And I tell you what really gives me hope is the way people are starting to stand up and say, enough is enough of this. This is our country. Yes. The Constitution starts with "we the people," not "we the ultra-rich," not "we who get elected to office," really. We the people. That's where the power comes from. And people are starting to stand up and do this. You're seeing it in the growing numbers of No Kings marches. You're seeing in the pushback against where the rights of people are being trampled upon. You saw it in Los Angeles, in Portland, in Minneapolis, and you see it here in Walla Walla a couple of times a week. It's all the way here in Walla Walla, you know, and that rebirth of the American spirit is what gives me hope. And if we can get enough reasonable representatives into the House in the midterms here, we can slow down the chaos and we can stop some of it. And then if we maintain the momentum in 28, and then there's the Senate and the presidency, then we can do big stuff. This is the beginning to something really huge. If we get there in 28, we can get things that we've never been able to get before, like health care for all. That's the goal. And we can put in new laws, and we can strengthen the oversight that Congress has of the administration. You know, the founding fathers were always afraid of an executive who got too powerful.
Yes.
The legislative branch was supposed to be the most powerful portion of the government, to watch over the executive. That was the founding fathers' intent. It's completely flipped now. It's completely flipped, where the legislative branch, the Congress, is subservient and just nods whatever the president wants to do. And we need to rebalance that. It's really going back to fundamentals. And it needs to be strengthened, because what all of this has shown us is where the weaknesses are. So much of our system depended upon norms, and they've just been completely shattered. So we need to go back and we need to plug those holes. And we can do that in 28, but we can set the stage for it in 26, and we can slow down the destruction that's going on. So that's... Thank you. And so that's really where I'm coming from here tonight. So I think I'll stop there, and we'll start taking some questions. And I really want to hear what you say. I've been holding listening sessions for the past couple of months, mostly in people's homes, where they've invited me in and a few friends, and those have been terrific. And this is our first attempt at doing sort of a listening session on a much larger scale. And I'm just so delighted you're all here to do this. If we had done this in individual homes, each table would have been an individual listening session, which are great. I love them. And if you're interested in hosting one, please sign up at the table on the way out, because I'm going to keep doing those in homes as well as larger events like this. So, Rodney, how about that first question?
Well, first, before we get to the first question, David, let me congratulate you and say thank you for stepping up to the call. I really appreciate it. I have your first question for you, and it's a two-parter. The first part of it is, do you support abolishing ICE? If not, what would you propose to do about the rogue nature of the organization?
Great question. So, yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this one lately, what to do about it. You know, and in leading hospitals and in leading military units, one of the things I've come to understand is how important the role of the culture of any organization is. I mean, the culture is usually a lot of unwritten norms of how we do things here. And cultures can be shaped intentionally, for good or for bad. And, originally I was thinking, maybe ICE could be reformed. And I'm starting to think, it's too late. The culture's just rotten to the core.
Yes.
There's a role for some sort of border security and some sort of internal security when it comes to immigration. And the tactics that ICE uses are so ridiculous and unlawful and over the board, and they're not standard police tactics at all. And those can be changed with training and but as I dug into this question a little bit more, thinking about it, what I learned was that that the Department of Homeland Security was formed after the 9/11 attacks, and it was formed pretty quickly. And since it has come into being, the Border Patrol agents and the ICE agents per capita have been arrested and convicted of more crimes than undocumented immigrants per capita. Wow. And what are those crimes mostly? Domestic abuse, rape, those two are at the top of the list. Our federal agents have been convicted per capita of more crimes than undocumented immigrants. The culture is rotten to the core. Yes, the mission needs to be done, but it needs to be done humanely, safely, and within the law.
Thank you, David. So next question. I did not vote for Trump. Still. Still, I believe he has accomplished positive change. Do you think he has made any positive changes? If so, what?
That's a great question. You know what? And I'm going to go home and research that. Honestly, because I, like many people, have been focused on one atrocity after the other. I can't keep up with the atrocities, much less think about what good might have come out of it. But maybe there is some. Maybe there is some, and I will.
Ballroom.
For those who couldn't hear that, and maybe the folks on live stream, the shout out was the ballroom as a positive change.
Not there yet.
More people involved in supporting our democracy.
Hey, there you go. So that got out, folks at home. More people are coming out to support democracy. That's true. I think more people have learned a lot about civics in the last few months than, or in the last year than they did before.
Yeah, I was gonna piggyback on that.
Sure,
when
go
you
ahead.
finish, right? And ask you, because that's what my grandmother always told me. Like, there's education in every decision.
Yeah.
All right, like, so the good could be the education, the use, the awareness, the acknowledgement of what's going on, right? So how would you then see some of the harshness that's going on in the country as moments and opportunities for us to educate ourselves, to come to the forefront, to lend a helping hand in the shift.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for articulating it there, Rodney, because I talked about that hope I see of people standing up, and that is the rebirth of the democracy. So maybe it was time to shake it up a little bit. Wish it wasn't so extreme, but yeah, absolutely. So, great question. Thank you for that.
Okay, another two-parter.
Okay.
Would you like a drink of water?
I can drink and listen at the same time.
I don't want you to be distracted at all, right? I want you to hear. One, why should I vote for you and not vote for another candidate? Two, what are your plans for helping the working poor and the unhoused in Eastern Washington?
So, why vote for me instead of another candidate? Last time I looked at the FEC website, there are 10 candidates running for this office.
Whoa.
Yeah, whoa. So there's really 4. I mean, there's our current representative, and there's 4 counting me, that have actually launched a campaign of some sort. So the other 6, I don't know, that apparently there's a lot of times people sign up and they file and they don't ever do anything. So it looks like there's 4 of us there right now. And we have some really similar backgrounds in some ways. One of the things I find most interesting is that 3 of us are veterans. Yeah. So there's a fireman from Spokane who was a Marine corporal, and he's running. There's another gentleman who lives north of Spokane somewhere, and he's a retired captain from the Army. And then there's me. Those are the 3 veterans. And then there's a woman who worked in the State Department. She also took the same oath. So 4 of us have taken that oath, who have active campaigns, have taken that oath and have served the country in some way. So, I mean, to me, that's kind of encouraging that that these folks are still honoring that oath and still willing to do something like this. The distinction I would draw between me and those folks is a little bit twofold. Number one is none of their military backgrounds put them in a command position. I had 4 commands. 1 training squadron, a medical group in a deployed situation in the desert of Saudi Arabia. We worked out of a tent hospital. It was sort of like a modern day MASH unit. And then 2 medical groups, a hospital and a clinic. And when you have the command position, you have the ultimate authority over lives of people. And when it's a medical unit, it's not just the troops you have under your command, but it's also all the people you serve. So in Fairchild, I was responsible for about 30,000 lives, 30,000 people, active duty, retired members, and the families of those members. So that's a heavy responsibility. Be ready for that, to do that. And then when I worked for Kaiser Permanente as a senior vice president, I had 115,000 members that I was responsible for the quality of their care. Had a $700 million budget. So none of the other candidates have that sort of leadership and management responsibility for people and money in any large organization. They were kind of individual contributors, if you will. Nothing wrong with that. It's just a difference. And when you're looking at something like working with as large of an organization as the federal government and understanding the budgets and how it affects lives, how the decisions you make every day, I think that experience is really important, that leadership and management experience.
Thank you. And for those of you in the audience, just remember, as the conversation go, if you happen to have a question at your table, write it on the card and hold it up, and someone will come get it and add it to the conversation. This is a ongoing conversation, so if you have questions as the conversation is going, just set them up and we'll just keep drawing.
Rodney, I think there was a second part to that question, if I don't remember.
Yes, it was. See, I got you.
Teamwork.
I got you.
Teamwork.
What are your plans for helping the working poor and the unhoused in Eastern Washington?
So, first of all, we need to restore the things that have been taken away from the working poor. Okay, not sure I like that phrase, the working poor, but we need to restore some of the supports we had for them. We need to restore Medicaid back to where it was. We need to restore the SNAP benefits as well. So just, I'm not sure our current representative really understands the damage that the one big blank bill did. Any ideas how many people in Eastern Washington rely on Medicaid? About a third. Yeah, wow.
Okay.
Yeah, we're a privileged group in this audience tonight, but it's a third rely on Medicaid. Children, it's half rely on Medicaid. So when you put in more bureaucratic hurdles, and that's really what it's done. I mean, this administration and our congressperson likes to talk about efficiency, but they put in bureaucratic hurdles. People struggle with those, especially some people on the lower end of the economic spectrum. They're just trying to survive. They're not, it may not be top of mind like, oh, it's time for me to recertify. So a lot of people are gonna drop off there. So the estimates are from the Washington State Healthcare Authority that 25,000 people in Eastern Washington will drop off the rolls of Medicaid. 25,000. Okay. And the same with SNAP. Any idea? 1 in 6.
Sorry.
1 in 6 gets SNAP benefits in Eastern Washington. That's about 128,000 people. So when you reduce that down, that's how bad you're affecting it. So that's the very first step, is to restore some of those things. And then beyond that, we need to look at programs that will bring more jobs and more opportunity into here. We need to look at value-added ag. We need to take some of the advantages that we have and turn those into opportunities. We have a port commissioner here tonight, and they do great work. And I think there could be more coordination amongst all the agencies, federal agencies included, and I see the head nodding there, to actually put plans together in all these locations. And I was once in a community where I was the chairman of an economic development corporation. And that was a terrific model. That brought together private businesses and all the municipalities within that county were members of it. And we actually referred to those people as investors because they were investing in this corporation that was bringing jobs into the area. And we put people on the road. There's actually seminars and trade shows that cities and counties go to recruit businesses to their area. And we spent a lot of time defining about what all the strengths of our county was, and we packaged those up and we put those people on the road. And the last year that I was chairman there, we brought 4,000 new jobs into the county. So it was really successful, and that's the idea of when all those entities, private and public, work together. So maybe we could encourage something like that. So, was there a second part to that question?
That was most of the second part. I think the piece too that was missing is the unhoused.
The unhoused. So we have a great model right here in Walla, and it's the Homeless Alliance right here. Before we moved here, my wife and I moved here, we were reading about that in the Union Bulletin. I'm going, wow, this is cool. And that's another actually public-private partnership. The city supports the Alliance incredibly well. At the same time, the Alliance is a not-for-profit organization that operates it. And what the city has provided is the land that it sits on, and a couple of the buildings, and an awful lot of help with writing grants. Because the city becomes aware of government grants, and they call up the Alliance and they say, could this apply? And they get together and they write the grant, and that is funded largely by grants and some by the city off of your document fees, and then a lot of contributions from the community for the not-for-profit. It's a wonderful example, and we can encourage a lot more of that working together.
Thank you, David. Our next question we have is, how aggressively will you support the impeachment of Trump and Vance?
I know.
Are we stopping there with Trump and Vance?
Yeah, let's There's a second half to it, but we probably should let you answer that first, and then we come back to the second part.
He's noticed that I answer the first part and then ask them, what's the second part?
I want to make sure it's due diligence, right?
Okay. So, well, the impeachment process calls for there to be an investigation. So, we'll follow the process. We'll follow the law there. Let's do the investigation. Let's see what it says. And I know there certainly appears to me to be plenty of enough evidence to start an investigation. And then I fully imagined that I would cast my vote in the affirmative. But I will keep an open mind and look at what the investigation says.
Thank you for that. Now the next part is, Trump is very demented.
Is there a question?
I'm checking my glasses to make sure I'm reading this correctly.
Okay, good.
And unfit. He is also trampling the Constitution, Article 5 and Article 7. Do you agree?
I kind of worked with somebody to prepare a little bit tonight, and he told me, don't give a yes/no answer. There's no doubt that the Constitution is being trampled upon, and as for the mental health of Donald Trump, I think that's obvious.
Thank you.
You got a tough job trying to read the writing, don't you?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Okay.
I can't really see, but I tried. They say these are prescription, but I won't buy it. I'm very concerned about U.S. Supreme Court. Sonia Sotomayor is one of the best in that group of attorneys there. Have you ever spoken or communicated with her about anything she can do to get the Supreme Court back on the right track?
No, I'm sorry, there's another yes, no question. No, I haven't talked to her. And I have a lot of concerns about the Supreme Court as well. When we first moved to Walla, I took a course under Tom Scribner called the Supreme Court.
Yep.
Maybe I see a few heads nodding out there. Maybe you've taken it too. It was really eye-opening and interesting. And what I see the Supreme Court doing right now is it shows you another flaw in our system, I think, is that the Supreme Court has been stacked with ideological folks who do not appear to be interpreting the law strictly by what the law says and what it was intended to do. I see interpretations that have a heavy overlay of ideology on top of it. So how do we fix that going forward? I think one thing we need to do, and Congress has the power to do this, is to force a real, no kidding, code of ethics on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
They didn't have one at all until a couple of years ago when there was so much uproar over some of the apparent money and gifts changing hands, and then they wrote one for themselves that has no teeth in it. It has no investigation in it, it has no penalties in it, nothing like that. But Congress can pass a law that says the Supreme Court, but they can do it a couple of different ways, but one would be to make the Supreme Court come up with their own that has these elements in it. Or they could just say, here's your elements, here's how it's going to work. But it takes the legislature to have enough backbone and enough political will to do that. So, but I think that would be a reasonable first step. And then there's other things to do too, like imposing term limits. I would have really liked to have had a job that I could have for life, I'm sure a lot of people in this country would. But, so term limits and maybe a few more members onto the court, extra members. And then stagger those terms so that as they retire, so that one president can't appoint a majority of the people, because there's a number of them. There's 3 or 4 rotating off every 4 or 6 years, probably every 4. So you time it with the president. So every president coming into office knows, they're going to get to nominate 2 people to the court, or something like that. I think that would be a very reasonable way to go. A very reasonable way.
Thank you, David. What does responsible oversight look like to you? How will you hold any administration accountable without turning Congress into a revenge machine? And what's one oversight you will pursue in your first term that will actually improve people's lives in Eastern Washington?
So, great question. Great question. Interesting phrase, revenge machine. I don't want to create a revenge machine. That's what we're witnessing right now. and it's tearing us apart. So I appreciate whomever wrote the question that they say without creating the revenge machine. So, so how will I exercise the override? That's the first part of that?
Yeah, how would you be accountable without turning, how will you be accountable to administration without turning it into a revenge machine?
So, just holding some people accountable, they will scream revenge machine. And it's going to be important for whomever is there, me or whoever else, to be able to talk about how this is not revenge, this is strictly looking at the facts. And there are tools available to Congress. There are hearings that can be done. And in some oversight will have to be stronger than just having a hearing, because we've seen that some members of the administration just come back and spew back at the questions that Congress asks them. But there's other tools that can be used for accountability. There's the power of the purse, that we can have very specific legislation that takes money back from things. We're seeing that kind of play out right now with the money that's being, that was withheld until we could get the administration to the table to talk about reforms in ICE. That's what's happening there. That's a good way to go about it. That's one of the most powerful things Congress has, is actually the power of the purse. And then there's targeted legislation to just say, no, that thing is wrong, or that thing can't be done, we need to do this, which I think is the second part of that question about how it specifically goes towards people in Eastern Washington.
Yeah, well, what is one
An
oversight
example of
that you think you would go after in your first term to help people's lives in Eastern Washington?
Well, if it's not resolved by then, probably the first thing I would try to go after would be to use that legislative tool to go after tariffs.
Yeah.
Because tariffs affect us all. That's part of what's driven up the cost of living. I mean, for sure inflation was already up there, but tariffs aren't helping it any. But it's specifically hurting our farmers around here. You know, the moment the administration slapped a tariff on Canada, the farmers' cost of input, their fertilizer, they use a lot of fertilizer from Canada, it went out the roof right there. The other way it's hurting our farmers is through their equipment. You know, the equipment that they use is largely manufactured overseas, and that's got tariffs coming in on it, and parts. You know, we've talked for years about right to repair, but you still have to have the parts if you're going to repair it yourself. And that all has the tariffs on top of it. So the tariffs by the Constitution belong to the legislative branch. And this administration has used emergency powers, has invoked emergency powers to put in tariffs. And Congress has ceded its authority over tariffs little by little over the years too. And Congress needs to take that back. So that would be probably the most immediate and impactful thing that we could go after. And that takes building a coalition of other representatives who want to go after it as well. And I think that's where I might have an advantage, having been a manager and a leader who has to work with a lot of different groups of people and a lot of different competing agendas to get on the same sheet of music so you can march forward.
Thank you. How will you work to protect non-white citizens in this district? My children are not white.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is back to the ICE question we had earlier. I know there's a lot of fear in our community. There's an article in the UB today about one confirmed ICE sighting in the community and multiple potential ones that have happened. I have a neighbor whose great-granddaughter, 7-year-old great-granddaughter, came home from school a few days ago in tears because she was afraid that her friends were going to be abducted. So if we can get rid of fear alone, fear of our own federal government, that would be a big step forward to help protect them as well. And then beyond that, I look at the folks in this room and I feel like it's kind of all up to us to have that community, to have one another's back. And I feel like in Walla Walla we have that to a large degree. But from the federal level, it's getting rid of that basic fear.
Thank you. Can I piggyback on that?
Please,
if I may?
please.
Because that question touches home with me a lot. I have kids, and my kids are also blended. And I get that conversation a lot in our very own community. So it's such a comfort and peace of mind when we talk about out loud the damage that ICE is doing across our country. It's very important that we know that and we see communities stepping up against them. But how do we tie in what's happening on a bigger level back to a local front, where agency at a local front? How do you think we tie that back together with that fight and that effort, as opposed to local community waiting for bigger agency to create framework to then pass down?
So, not sure I understand your question exactly.
So, the conversation of safety, especially around ICE and other things, a lot of times it feels like we're waiting for Olympia, DC, these places to pass framework down. How do we connect from a place of, say, you in Congress, back to our local place that ties that connection where it's a joint effort on that framework?
Oh, okay. So, great question. Our current representative blames what ICE is doing on so-called sanctuary cities and states, as if that somehow causes ICE to act in the way they do. He says, well, if only the local forces would cooperate with ICE, then we wouldn't have to behave this way, is essentially what he's saying, which to me is
crazy.
Rodney says crazy. I'll go with that. The reason there are sanctuary states, that term, sanctuary states and sanctuary communities, is because they don't trust the federal government. Our current representative also says, all the power should be at the state, and then he starts blaming Olympia for things. But he says all the power should be at the state. The federal government shouldn't have a whole lot to do with things like this. But then he turns around and says, that the federal agents have superiority and have immunity and those sorts of things. But they can work together. If we trusted the federal agents, that they would stay within the Constitution, if they were trained as well as our Walla Walla Police Department, which the community trusts, then they probably would work together. If they had an undocumented person who had committed a violent crime in their jail, when that person was ready to be released, we would probably want them to call ICE, but we don't trust them.
the moment we call them, we know there's going to be some sort of abuse, or there's a high probability of it. So I think it's restoring trust all up at all levels of government there. And when I was in the Air Force, I could have never imagined myself sitting on a stage talking about not trusting the federal government. I just could not have imagined that. That line, all enemies, foreign and domestic, I often wondered, what do they mean by domestic? And now I often feel like the enemy is within, but I don't mean it the same way Donald Trump means it. I'm looking at him and his colleagues. And that just sends shivers down my spine. That's why this election, if it's free and fair, that's a big if. That's why this is so important.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. Trust matters. Thank you. This is a great question. It feeds right into what you just ended the answer of the last question with.
Okay, I'll try to keep going.
How do we stop the federal government interfering in the 2026 election?
Oh, come on, Rodney, you planted that one.
Maybe just a little bit.
Oh. Well, we probably all have a role to play in that. And one of the biggest roles I think we have is to support our state leaders and our local folks who manage these elections. That's one of the things that's made our election system so strong and impervious to outside influences, especially from other countries, is that it is so decentralized is to they can't support leaders, and that is a real strength. And our local folks and that puts that responsibility for elections very close to us, the people, and that's a pretty cool thing. That's a pretty cool thing, and it's a little bit of a side note, but I have to bring it up. Is our current representative wants to nationalize elections. Yeah, I know that's not a phrase he uses. He doesn't use the word nationalize like Donald Trump does or has begun just this week. But he has said that he wants a national election law that standardizes elections across the country, does away with mail-in voting. You have to stand in line. Everybody votes on one day. That's terrific, unless you're a military member who's stationed 6 states away or around the world. I guess we're going to call all the Navy ships into port and put them all on airplanes so they can go home and vote on the same day. It's crazy. That works great, unless you're a physician or a nurse who works a 12-hour shift. Or you're the spouse of a physician or nurse or anybody else who works a 12-hour shift, and you're home with the kids and you got to bundle them up and try and figure out how to get there. We've had in Washington State for years and years all mail-in elections, and there's no evidence of fraud at all. All in all. But anyway, back to the question, which is how to prevent it. I think it's we make sure that our state leaders know that we like our election system the way it is. We want it to stay that way. And as we get closer and closer to the elections, if we start to see the evidence of abuses, that we take to the streets, and we just do not stand for it.
Will you be declining or accepting PAC and corporation contributions? Do you know how other candidates in this primary stand on this funding issue for their campaigns?
So, great question. No, I'm not taking any corporate PAC monies. If I'm offered any PAC monies from other PACs, it completely depends on what their stances are. Do they align with my values or don't they? And that makes me completely dependent upon individual contributions like all of you. So I'll wait till the end to talk about donations, but that's a little preview, okay? I do want to expand just a little bit on that though and talk about the danger of dark money in our political system. So with individual contributions, I'm sure you may not know, I didn't until I started this, about some of the campaign financing laws. And as an individual, you're limited to giving $3,500 to a candidate for the primary, and then if you choose, $3,500 to the same candidate for the general election. That's it. That's all you can give. So stack that up against PACs that pour in millions of money, millions of dollars. The other thing is I have to collect information from each of you, your name, your address, your employer, if you're employed, and turn that in. And that's all public record. Okay, so you can look up and you can see where the donations came from. And I have to keep track also of, do you exceed that $3,500 or that $7,000? And I have to give you a refund if you do. But the dark money, you don't know where that comes from. That goes into a PAC. One person can give as much money as they can possibly scrape together and put in there, and then that PAC can do whatever it wants with it, and nobody knows. Nobody knows. And that's wrong. And that goes back to the Supreme Court decisions around Citizens United, and we can change that if we choose to. We can get rid of that dark money. And that has so corrupted our politics. You know, one of the most amusing things to me is that the Supreme Court said money is free speech. Donating money. You know, I just can't. You know, it doesn't talk to me. You know, free speech. Anyway, so was there a second part to that one? No, that was it. Okay.
That was it. Yes, no.
Okay.
I think you answered that one well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Have you noticed how many of these questions and we can change that? These are all policy decisions. These are decisions that have been made along the years that have put us to where we are. And we can change that.
I agree, we can change it. And I think, you know, again, just my opinion, one day at a time and waking up and just wanting to have the mindset and heart and the will to join in the effort to change it.
Yeah, and getting enough of us
Yes.
move in that direction.
Yes, I agree with you on that. What are the political demographics in Spokane in today's environment? Do you feel Eastern Washington may be more Democratic leaning?
Well, you know, I'm not aware of current polls. We've looked at a lot of data from past elections, and what we see is that, you know, this entire district has been voting roughly 60-40 ever since Tom Foley. In Spokane specifically, The entire city, you'd probably call it purple, but there's red areas and there's certainly some dark blue spots as well in Spokane. And what that, as far as, is it changing more democratic? I don't know as I would say that, but what I do hear and feel is that there's a lot of independents that are very unhappy with the way things are going. A lot of independents who would change their vote today if they could from before. So I gotta imagine that they're gonna change the way they vote come November. And I think there's a lot of unhappy Republicans out there as well. Last summer, I worked the booth at the fair, and there were an awful lot of people that walked by and said, you know, I used to be a Republican, but I'm not anymore, or something to that effect. I had an individual today at Rotary approach me and said, I've voted Republican all my life and I'm done. You know, it's changing. And I'm also reminded of my mother-in-law, whom I loved dearly, and she used to say, you know, I'm not sure I'm a Democrat, but I know I'm not a Republican. And I think there's a lot of people that are probably that way. They're not ready to call themselves a Democrat or even an independent. You know, they're still going to call themselves a Republican. After all their friends are Republicans, you know. But when they mark that ballot, you know, nobody's looking over their shoulder, and they stick it in the mail and send it back. I think there's a tide turning. And I really don't want to make this about Democrat versus Republican either.
Yes.
I want to make this about the issues. That's one thing I've been real careful with my campaign is none of the materials or my website identify me as a Democrat. Doesn't mean I'm ashamed of it. I'll tell anybody that asks. But the moment there's a label stuck on it, ears start to close. And that's on both sides, the left and the right. The ears will close. So when I just talk about the issues, I find that not only is there common ground about what the issues are, but there's a lot of common ground about what the goal is too. So then we just figure out how to get between the issue and the goal. Let's just talk about how to get there. And people listen to that. So I have to tell you, 3 days ago, I got somebody who contacted us through the website, which, by the way, is davidwomackforcongress.com. But they contacted me through the website, and they said, you don't say what party you're in, but you sound like a libertarian or a Republican. And I thought, wow, okay, I guess mission accomplished with talking about the issues. So I wrote him back and I told him, well, I'm a Democrat. And I told him what I just told you, but I don't put that out there because I want to talk about the issues. And he thanked me for my response. Then yesterday, I got another one that says, you don't say what you are, but you sound like a centrist Democrat. Okay, good. You stick any label on me you want. But let's talk about the issues and let's get them fixed. I mean, I think that's what's important. I think that's what's important to probably everybody in this room and every American out there. I think people are sick and tired of the hyper-partisanship. You know, one thing that has come to really bug me when I hear it is a politician who will say, I'm going to go to Washington and I'm going to fight for you. And then they go to Washington and they just fight each other. I want to go to Washington. I want to work for you.
I like that. Yes, please. But I agree
Just
with
me.
you. I agree with you, and I know any and everybody that know me knows. You know, my belief when it comes to, we're in a time, whether you want to believe it or not, where we have so many voters that are truly about what is the issue, how we're going to solve it, right? And we hear that over and over and over again, right? And I think you paying attention to that and being open to that is so refreshing. So again, for that, we thank you. You know, we got groups popping up on our college campuses, pushing that same effort. Policy, how can we help?
Yeah.
Right? That are voting age, right? And the moment you stick a party on them, they shut down on us.
Right.
So,
Whoa.
phone call.
No, that's not a phone call. That is 750, Rodney.
Okay. Well, again, thank you. And so we're going to get one last question in before we go. Oh. I think this is a good one to end on.
Okay.
What committees would you like to be on?
It's a great question. Great question. So there's two committees that I think would benefit Eastern Washington in our district the most, if I could get on them. Now, most freshman Congress people, they get on one committee, maybe two, if they're not the more high-powered committees. And both of these are, of course, high-powered committees. So if I could get on one of these two, I would love it. Energy and commerce, number one.
Yes.
Because energy is so important to us here. Our dams are so important to us. Data centers going in. We've just got so much work to do to shore up our infrastructure and our power grid. And it's just going to be more and more and more. Energy and commerce also, surprisingly, because of the name of it, but they're the ones who work with Medicare and Medicaid policy. Yeah, energy and commerce. So I really want to work on that. And they also have a lot to do with keeping rural hospitals open, specifically charged with rural hospitals. So I think those issues right there would have a lot to help this area. And then the other one is agriculture, because it deals with all the things that our farmers and our agriculture industries do, and can also help a lot with trade, which is, someone once told me that, our farmers don't want aid, they want trade. And I thought that was a good little catchphrase for me to remember. And I would love to be on one of those two. So, yeah, so, great. So I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. If we didn't get to your question and you really want an answer, please go to the website, or if you see me in town or have my phone number, give me a call. But please go to the website and put your question in there, and I will get back to you and answer that question for you. Again, I want to thank Karen and Jim, the owners of Cavu here, for providing this great venue for us. Thank you. My friend Rodney Outlaw for moderating. And our campaign volunteers who man the tables and help set everything up tonight and get the live stream going and all those things that make an event like this happen. And mostly I want to thank my wife, Julie. Is she in here? I don't see her, but all of you please tell her that I thank her. And, no, seriously, she is.
Oh, there she is.
She is my inspiration and the love of my life, and I'm so. And I would not be doing this without her support. And the question she asked me a couple of months back one morning when she said, "So are you ready to run?" So anyway, thank you, honey. So thanks to all that, folks. And before I leave, I do want to ask for your help because we're not going to be able to do this alone. Just a few of us volunteers and myself. So if you would like to volunteer to help us, please stop at the table on the way out and talk to the folks there, or go to the website. And again, that's David Womack for Congress, right there. Just put .com on the end of it, and sign up to volunteer. And we're having volunteer orientations. And we're trying to make it as fun as possible, just like tonight. You know, balloons, bands. Let's have a good time while we're doing this, right? And we have lots of jobs that can be done. Yes, there will be door knocking in the future, but there's a lot of other things that can be done. Some people don't like to do that, but there's plenty of things that can be done. And then and then of course you can always donate. And we need to reach about 500,000 voters in this district. And if you don't know, we're in the far southwest corner of the district. It goes all the way to the Idaho border and all the way to the Canadian border. And that's a lot of geography to cover, and it just takes a lot of resources to do it. We're going to do it as efficiently and as low cost as we can, but that's still going to take money. So on the website, you can hit the donate button. There's also, if you don't want to do that, there's also envelopes here that you can send a check in, or you can empty your pockets tonight right into those envelopes. and we'll be happy to take that. So again, thank you for coming. You've been a wonderful audience. I'm going to stand up there and say goodbye and turn off the microphone that's squealing on me. So
let's give David a round of applause.